As with any pop media, we're forced to believe how successful a franchise is purely from how much marketing it receives. Sure, we're constantly reminded popular titles such as Call of Duty, Mario, Madden, Halo, and Peter Molyneux screwing up are, but behind these PR behemoths, there's other franchises with far less marketing clout, but surprisingly are just as, if not more, popular. So this episode is dedicated to those mislaid moneymakers, those strayed suffrages, and those clandestine charters. As I say, but hello you, I'm Guru Larry, and I'll welcome you to Fact Hunt. 5 unbelievably massive franchises you've probably never heard of. Our first franchise is quite the oddity. For the simple fact, the series has only ever had 2 releases in the West, and only in the US at that. But they've not actually made an official sequel in the series since 1996. Now, the J.B. Harold Murder Club is sadly not about a group of serial killers hanging out, but a menu-based series starring the exploits of the tentatively named J.B. Harold, a private detective who solves homicides usually situated in the Washington, Chicago or New York area. It's surprising that most people haven't heard of this franchise, as you'd think a crime-solving series would be quite popular in the West. I mean, look how big the Police Quest games were at the time. But J.B. Harold shot himself in the foot before even getting it in the door in the US due to some surprisingly overlooked and shocking controversy. Despite being called Murder Club, the series delved into rather graphic detail of several other crimes, and one of the missions in the 1991 TurboGrafx CD release was about solving a rape, which, in the kiddies' focused world of the early 90s, was an incredibly taboo subject, and probably is even more today, come to think of it. Role-playing magazine Dragon even criticised the game for not having a label on the box warning about the mature subject matter in the game. You know, as not to mislead parents from all the other child-focused video games with the word murder in the title. But in an era when they had mass political debates on whether to even allow blood into a video game, secretly adding in games revolving around sexual assault would have gone off the charts. So, despite being set in the US, J.B. Harold's journey in the West quickly got him deported back to Japan. And with no place to expand the franchise with this tarnished reputation behind it, his club was quietly closed down. Anyhow, so how does Mr. Harold's escapades fit in with the overall gaming popularity? Well, despite the fact there's only 5 games and 2 remakes in the entire franchise, it's sold a pretty impressive 20.1 million copies. More impressive considering it ended in the mid-90s. But that slots it in selling more copies than the LEGO Star Wars franchise with 20 million sales, but ever so slightly less than Frogger with 20.2 million sales. So, farewell KG J.B. Harold. Who knows, if you were a little more forthcoming and selective with your crime solving, you could have been the Sherlock Holmes of video games by now. Well, ignoring the hundreds of already existing Sherlock Holmes video games, that is. Just like J.B. Harold, we come to another game with countless Japanese releases, but only 2 in the US. Now, the Live Powerful Pro Baseball series, as I'm not pronouncing its Japanese name, is a massively popular line of Japanese baseball games starring copyright-infringing clones of Fred the Home Pride mascot. The franchise started out way back in 1994 on a Super Famicom, and it's spawned well over 60 titles in the series, and has appeared on everything from mobile phones to arcade games. Those Japanese sure do love their super deformed baseball. But, like I said earlier, the Live Powerful Pro Baseball series did briefly pass into the world of the round eyes in the late noughties, when 2K picked up the licence, slapped a Major League Baseball endorsement on it, and released it as MLB Power Pros on the PlayStation 2, Nintendo Wii, and Nintendo DS. The holy trinity of shovelware magnets. Unfortunately, 2K built it, but they never come. The US weren't interested in playing as characters that looked like the bastard love child of Rayman and a Lego minifigure, as it only lasted 2 games, and fell into bargain bins quicker than insert popular YouTuber's career for saying something stupid this week comment. But the only other reason I can think of why the powerful pro baseball series was never properly released outside of Japan is because no one, bar America, really gives a toss about baseball. They all prefer its 2-base cousin cricket, which ironically gets bugger all games released for it in general. And let's not forget it's also published by Konami, who we all know are a bunch of twats. But we're here to know how popular the franchise is, and for a game predominantly only ever released in Japan, it's raked in an impressive 20.5 million copies. That means it sold more than the Age of Empires franchise with 20 million copies, but less than the Batman Arkham series with 22 million sales. So one Batman is more popular than another Batman. Yes, I know it's a rubbish pun. Ubisoft may be infamous for their bargain bin franchises, such as Asphalt, Pets, and Tom Clancy after 2 weeks of release. But the true king of discount labels is their Imagine series. Oh, you know the ones. You'll stumble across aisles of the bloody things in supermarkets, each adorned with a gormless girl grinning like she's been doped up with the Joker's Smilex and photoshopped onto a plain background. But hand over your hard-earned money for one of these things and you can emulate multiple exciting careers, such as being a vet again, being a human vet, copyright infringement, misspelled babies, correctly spelled babies, giving babies parties, babies in a 3rd dimension, sitting on babies, and finally being part of a defunct Lake Naughty's all-girl esports clan that died after discovering no one gives a shit about Ubisoft games in a competitive environment. Alright one, that one's fake. Now, in all fairness, the Imagine series is obviously aimed at tween-age girls, but the young female virtual vocation market proved to be highly lucrative for Ubisoft, as with a whopping 46 games under its bargain bin belt, it sold in excess of 21.4 million copies, which slots it in selling slightly less copies than the God of War series with 21.6 million sales, but amazingly more than the Castlevania series with 20 million sales. But you know how the saying goes, where there's trash, there's treasure, even if they haven't made any since 2013. Of course, it's a legal requirement to have at least one South Korean property on the list of popular franchises you've never heard of. But even by global gaming standards, NCSoft's MMORPG franchise Lineage is wildly popular, and it's nearly all down to the country's laws and a bout of good timing. Released way back in 1998 at the dawn of online gaming, Lineage sets you in the usual Dungeons & Dragons world of elves, knights, magicians, and princes. But at the height of its popularity, it had an excess of 3 million subscribers. Albeit most of them were in South Korea, but that's an almost unbelievable user base for the late 90s. So why was Lineage so popular in South Korea? Well, it was all down to politics and good timing really. Up until 1998, it was illegal to import Japanese products into the country. And since both Nintendo and Sony are Japanese companies, it meant there was virtually zero competition from consoles in South Korea. So it was join the PC master race, or no gaming at all for you, Sonny Jim. And aside from subscribers, how did it do in overall sales? Well, in total, Lineage has raked in a pretty huge 43 million sales, which sets it as having slightly more than the Dragon Ball line of games with 41 million sales, and right behind the legendary Pac-Man series with 43.2 million sales.
We usually do.
So while the likes of World of Warcraft may have eclipsed Lineage in terms of sales, online presence and popularity, Lineage shows how popular a franchise can still be despite falling off the radar. I bet that came as a surprise. And yes, I know it's probably the most well-known of all these games, even though it's practically unheard of outside of the US. But top slot goes to MECC's seminal dysentery simulator, the Oregon Trail. For those of you unfamiliar with the Oregon Trail, it's an edutainment title that provided children a thrilling experience of travelling through the rugged Wild West, while seeing your loved ones die from starvation and snake bites, and all emulated through fantastic high-res graphics that rival the bat from Pong. Amazingly, the Oregon Trail is also one of the oldest franchises in the whole of video games too, with the first edition being released way back in 1971. But with just 15 titles in the main series chalked under its wagon, it sold an unbelievable 65.5 million copies. Impressive that it is, that it puts that ahead of Halo's amazing 65 million copies, and just behind Battlefield's 66 million units. Now that's even more astounding when you consider that the series is almost entirely exclusive to US sales. Granted that a lot of them would have been to schools and libraries, possibly serial killers given its morbid nature, but the Oregon Trail is the most unexpected massive franchise on our list. Oh, and for the record, us Brit School's education title of choice was Granny's Garden, where instead of dying from horrific diseases, you need to rescue children from a witch hiding in your grandmother's backyard by being as polite as possible. Yeah, it does sound a bit mundane in comparison.